Here we are for another round of the 70s versus the 90s, and it's a showdown between two comic book vixens when I put Roger Vadim's Barbarella against Rachel Talalay's Tank Girl. And this one was a fun one to get through because both these ladies are really hot and both movies are very fun. So let's just dive right on in. The first one we have is Barbarella, directed by Roger Vadim and starring his then wife Jane Fonda. And of course, Roger Vadim, a French filmmaker who had an ability to get all the finest women in the world at that time to take their clothes off, whether it was Brigitte Bardot, Catherine Deneuve, and then, like I said, his then wife Jane Fonda. And of course, that opening credit sequence where she's in the space suit, just a little like space suit strip tease and zero gravity and stuff, that's pretty hot. It's got like the swinging, like a psychedelic Dean Martin sounding motherfucker singing the song Barbarella, all that shit. And she gets her, she's like a secret agent. She's tasked with finding this evil scientist Durand, who that's probably where that band got that name from. They just took the D off the end of it. And she encounters a lot of strange shit, on a planet she crash lands on. And the one thing can be said about this film is like the production design is nothing to be scoffed at. I mean, Dino De Laurentiis was the one that produced this film, and of course, like he would go on to produce Flash Gordon in the early '80s, and you kind of see the similar special effects. But Dino De Laurentiis wasn't going to have anything but the best working for him, and of course, like in Roger, in the film itself, where it probably suffers the most is that it has 8 writers for the script. The two main ones are Terry Southern, who was one of the greatest screenwriters of all time, and also wrote Doctor Strangelove and a little bit of Easy Rider. And, he had an ability to kind of capture the counterculture of the time and, slap a little social commentary in there. And we kind of see that, definitely like all that free love and hippie stuff, but, just in space. And then, of course, Roger Vadim took care of all the sexy stuff. And then, I don't know what the hell the other 6 writers were doing, I guess, to make it more palatable to an international audience, because it's a France-Italian co-production. It's also released by Paramount Pictures, So the film's definitely a romp. Jane Fonda's a total smoke show in this. She even shows her tits, and so like that's a hell of a, that was a big deal back in 68 when the film came out, and the early time when you could really show like stuff like that on the screen, so it's a bit, and the thing about it is the acting in it though is probably what kills it, and that's where the campy aspect comes from, because it's like real silly. There's not like any real danger in the film, of course it is a comic book movie. The action is very cartoonish, so you can't really fault it for that. But, by the end of the movie, it is kind of like you get the little, John Philip Law plays that angel type dude where he's got the wings and shit and it flies away with him and shit at the end. And, John Philip Law himself was kind of a mid actor, but every once in a while he'd do something good. But clearly he's just there to look like a fucking angel god or some type shit, But then you move on to Tank Girl, directed by Rachel Talalay. And, starring Lori Petty, who, who's no slouch herself. She has kind of a punk rock sex appeal in this film, and then she's got her hot friend that played by Naomi Watts, who with the glasses and that fucking Australian accent, Jesus Jones. But anyways, the film itself is in kind of a dystopian future, 2033, which is not really that far off when you think about it, because it's, it's 2025 currently. And like it hadn't rained since like this comet hits. There's no water, and the whole world's run by the WP, Water and Power and shit, and played brilliantly by Malcolm McDowell, the head guy, all that shit. He's the main villain in the film, and of course, if you've got Malcolm McDowell as your villain, like you can't really go wrong because that dude can choose some scenery and stuff. And the WP, they've got one of their main enemies, their 2 main enemies. They've got the Tank Girl and her little group that they eradicate at the beginning of the film. And then they got the Rippers, which are these like half man, half kangaroo people that, those guys are pretty wild, they fuck shit up. And then, especially when Tank Girl and her fucking homie team up with them and shit and get shit going, And then the film itself, like I said, is very like punk rock sexy, but also like the characters feel like more like real people as opposed to like what the shit that you see in Barbarella and stuff, which is like full on fantasy. This stuff, it gets to be fantasy, but also a little more reality because like shit, that whole not having water, that could be a very, very well happen, So it's one of those things where it's like when you're looking at both these movies, you know, and where they come from and shit. Of course, it's kind of hard to like, you know, bitch at a comic book movie for being more real, you know, because like at the end of the day, they are supposed to be fun and campy. But honestly, I would probably say that Tank Girl is the more fun movie, you know, because of course, like Lori Petty, you know, she's comical. Because think about Jane Fonda as Barbarella, you can kind of see because Jane Fonda was a very serious actor. You know, she really took her craft seriously, much like her father did. And you know, you can kind of tell like she's keeping it very tongue in cheek. Whereas like Lori Petty, she's really like leaning into this role. You know, that little fucking musical number that she does with it, and you know, and even that. Honestly, I would argue that little fucking you know, shower scene, it's like barely a shower scene, is sexier than that damn fucking zero gravity strip tease that Jane Fonda does. And seeing Lori Petty trying to take a shower, and you know, it's all in the editing too. You know, editing can like really make or break a sequence. You know, make it sexy or make it you know intense or whatever the fuck. You know, it does come down to the editing. It's the final measure to put your fucking film together. But you know, I gotta say it's Tank Girl this round, you know, and for anybody keeping score, that's 44-37. The 70s are still up by 7, but the 90s, man, they keep coming back. You know, like 70s will give one, 90s will give one. It's like it's neck and neck, but there's still like a wide enough gap. The 90s really gotta work for it to get it back. But the thing about it is both movies very campy in and of themselves. You know, they're not, you know, it's not like any one's more serious than the other, but the danger feels more real in Tank Girl, like where it's fucking Barbarella, you know, it's like she'll get into all these crazy things and like the silliest shit will get them out of there. Like these motherfuckers in Tank Girl, they're facing like real danger and shit because, you know, Malcolm McDowell don't fuck around. That fucking water thing that they put in that just sucks all the water out of you. Like that's fucking diabolical, you know, and the way that shot and everything. And, you know, like I said, the production design is just as good too. Of course, Catherine Hardwicke, the production designer on Tank Girl, you know, and they, like I said, both of them, when it comes to production design, they'd probably be about even. But, you know, where it comes to acting, I would say Tank Girl really takes it on that one. And as far as like Rachel Talalay might be a better director than Roger Vadim. You know, he was a good tits and ass director, but, you know, I don't really think even himself took the material that seriously because, you know, especially at that time, though, who else was going to make Barbarella? You know, Russ Meyer wasn't going to make it. The tits were too small. So that, you know, it's just the way shit falls into place, and it may not always be where it needs to be, but anything can be iconic when you put a big star in it and a legendary director, and people remember it because, you know, it's the first time they saw titties in space. You know, probably around the time, I don't know if Nude on the Moon, I forget when that one came out, but you know, the first time anybody remembers seeing tits in space. But like I said, if I've said anything wrong, anything you disagree with, feel free to eviscerate me in the comments. You know, like I said, this is a rough draft to a doctoral thesis, you know, or maybe even a podcast. Who knows? I'm just trying to lay all this shit out. I got more than 5 pages of these matchups, and so you're going to see bonus rounds. The next main event is Dirty Harry versus Seven. You'll see that every Saturday, a main event. And like I said, these bonus rounds, whenever I got free time, I'll throw these out there because, like, I got to know, you know. And so, if you got any recommendations, feel free to add them in the comments. You know, like I said, it's all open forum. You know, I'm just having fun with this. You know, it's all, like I said, the summer's over, but this shit's only heating up.